By most industry estimates, Rolex produces roughly 1 million watches per year. That figure matters more to the people who do not wear them than to the people who do. The brand spent the better part of 7 decades becoming the most recognized watch on Earth, and somewhere in that process, it stopped being useful to the kind of person who had been wearing it longest. Not because the quality declined. Rolex makes an excellent watch and has consistently done so. What changed was the function the watch performed. The Submariner, the Datejust, the Day-Date became aspirational objects in the clearest possible sense. Things people wanted before they could have them and acquired as evidence of having arrived somewhere worth arriving at. When enough people arrive, the destination changes meaning. Old money understood this before it had language for it. The watches on this list were chosen from the world of haute horlogerie for a single quality that does not reduce to price or rarity, though most of them score on both. The people who know what they are can read them at a glance, and everyone else walks past. That asymmetry is not accidental. It is, in most cases, the entire design philosophy. Number 7. In the summer of 1917, Louis Cartier was working in Paris when he came across aerial reconnaissance photographs of the Western Front. The images showed tanks moving in formation across the battlefield, and from altitude the shape was distinctive. A long rectangular chassis with parallel tracks running the full length of each side. Cartier drew a watch the same afternoon, or so the account goes, and the case became the chassis, and the lugs became the tracks. The first tank was presented to General John Pershing in 1919, and within a decade it had settled into the wardrobe of a particular kind of person. Educated, deliberate, aware of proportion, and not especially interested in explaining themselves. John Kennedy wore a tank. Andy Warhol wore a tank, and in an interview in the 1980s said it was the only watch he trusted. The reasons he gave were characteristically oblique, but the choice speaks for itself. What makes the tank relevant to this list is a specific quality of its legibility. Someone who knows watches recognizes it immediately. The rectangular case is singular enough that there's no mistaking it for anything else. But someone who doesn't know watches sees a small, clean, slightly unusual rectangle on a leather strap, and that's all they see. The watch has never tried to look like anything other than what it is. And for the people who've worn it consistently over the past 100 years, that's been precisely the point. Number 6. The Portugieser came from an unusual commission. In 1939, 2 Portuguese watch importers approached the International Watch Company in Schaffhausen with a specific request. They wanted a wristwatch accurate enough to function as a navigational instrument, which meant fitting a marine chronometer-grade movement into a case sized for a wrist rather than a ship's chart table. The result, catalogued internally as reference 325, was larger than almost anything else being produced at the time, with a dial stripped of everything except what was needed. Arabic numerals, a subsidiary seconds register, and a case that existed, architecturally, to contain a movement too substantial for the conventions of the era. That original logic, size earned by substance rather than pursued for its own sake, is what has kept the Portugieser circulating in the same rooms it circulated in before most of its current wearers were born. It doesn't look like a sports watch, and it doesn't look like a dress watch in the conventional sense either. It looks like a precision instrument designed by someone who thought carefully about what a precision instrument needed to look like, and then stopped. In certain rooms, that combination reads as a statement. In most rooms, it reads as a large, clean, slightly serious watch, and the man wearing it doesn't feel the need to clarify which of those descriptions he intended. Number 5. Vacheron Constantin was founded in Geneva in 1755 and hasn't missed a year of production since. The manufacturer makes this claim openly, and the watchmaking industry accepts it, which makes Vacheron either the oldest continuously operating watch manufacturer in the world or very nearly so, depending on who's counting. That longevity is recognized formally by the hallmark of Geneva, the certification applied to movements that meet the canton's standards for finishing and precision. One of the more demanding quality designations in Swiss watchmaking. The patrimony is the model the house considers its truest expression of what it's been doing for the past 2.5 centuries. It's a round watch with a white or cream dial, applied gold hour markers, no date, and in its manual wind configuration, a total case height of roughly 4 millimeters. You could stack 3 coins and get something similar in thickness. The watch sits against the wrist the way a properly tailored jacket sits on the shoulder, not calling attention to itself, simply fitting as it should. There's a version of the patrimony conversation that goes on for some time about movement finishing. The cotes de Genève, striping on the bridges, the anglage on the beveled edges, the perlage on the plates. And in certain circles it does. 270 years of accumulated practice compressed into something not much thicker than a coin stack on a wrist that may or may not belong to someone who could explain what they're wearing. Often it doesn't matter either way. Vacheron sits alongside Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet in what the industry refers to as the Holy Trinity of watchmaking, 3 houses whose reputations for movement quality and finishing have remained largely unchallenged for longer than most of the other names in this space have existed. Number 4. In 1931, a group of British polo players stationed in India brought a problem to Jaeger-LeCoultre. The crystal on a wristwatch exposed to a mallet impact or a fall from horseback didn't reliably survive a match. They wanted a watch that could protect itself. The solution the manufacturer arrived at was a case designed to slide along its own fixed carrier and flip completely over, presenting a plain metal back to the world while the dial rested face down against the wrist. The mechanism locks with a click. The back panel can be engraved, and many of them have been over the decades, initials and dates and dedications that sometimes pass down with the watch itself. The dimensions that Jaeger-LeCoultre settled on in 1931, every dimension of the case and carrier, are the dimensions in production today. The Reverso is an Art Deco watch with a specific origin story, built for a sport played by people with enough land to play it on, and the proportions carry that history in the architecture of the case. If you know the watch, the silhouette is as readable as a signature. If you don't, you're looking at a slim, rectangular, slightly unusual thing on a wrist, and the person wearing it is unlikely to explain it unprompted. The polo players wanted something that could take a hit and keep what mattered safe. Whether that describes a watch mechanism or something else entirely depends on who's wearing it. Number 3. Ferdinand Adolf Lange founded his workshop in Glashwet in the Saxon Ore Mountains in 1845. By the turn of the century, Glashwet had become a center of German precision watchmaking, built not on ornamentation, but on the measurable accuracy of what was being produced there. In 1945, Soviet forces dismantled the factories as war reparations. The Lange family's assets were expropriated, and the workshop ceased to exist. A century of accumulated craft, tooling, documentation, and institutional memory, gone in a matter of months. In 1990, following German reunification, Walter Lange, Ferdinand Adolf's great-grandson, began the process of rebuilding. In October of 1994, 49 years after the workshop was closed, A. Lange and Söhne presented 4 watches at a press event in Dresden. The 1815 model, its name taken from the birth year of the founder, became the house's foundational dress watch. It uses a German silver 3/4 plate movement, the kind of construction Glashwet had been refining since the 1800s, with movement finishing that operates to its own regional standard rather than borrowing the language of Geneva, and with an oversized date display at 12 o'clock. The dial hasn't changed in any meaningful way since the day it debuted. The brand doesn't advertise in the manner of houses with something to prove. People who wear A. Lange and Söhne watches tend to have found them through other people who wear them, which is the oldest distribution channel there is, and, in this context, the most deliberate one. When someone asks what it is, the answer is brief, and the conversation tends to move on. The watch is usually enough. Number 2. In 1932, Patek Philippe was in serious financial difficulty. The Depression had reached Geneva. The manufacture had been acquired 2 years earlier by the Stern brothers, who operated a dial-making company and had bought Patek largely to protect their most important customer. The Stern family still owns Patek Philippe today, an unbroken private ownership across nearly a century that is, in the context of Swiss watchmaking, essentially without parallel. Among their first decisions was to design a watch so restrained in its ambitions that it could outlast whatever economic conditions followed. The Calatrava, catalogued as reference 96, was round yellow gold with a hobnail bezel and a manually wound movement of such deliberate simplicity that it became, in the years that followed, the reference point against which the industry has measured almost every subsequent dress watch. No date, no complications beyond the hours and minutes. The case profile is something watchmakers have spent decades trying to describe, and the descriptions consistently circle back to the same word: proportion. Whether it's the most proportionate wristwatch ever produced is actively debated in the rooms where such things are debated. That it's been in continuous production since 1932 is not. Patek's advertising has carried some version of the same line for decades. You never actually own a Patek Philippe. You merely look after it for the next generation. As advertising lines go, This one is more accurate than most. It's a watch you're expected, eventually, to give away, which means the decision to acquire it carries an implied commitment to the person who will one day receive it. The design reflects that weight in the only way a watch can, by being so settled in its proportions that it's never required revision. Number 1. François-Paul Journe trained in Paris and spent years working for his uncle, who restored antique clocks before establishing his manufacture in Geneva in 1999. An independent watchmaker in the strictest sense, no parent company, no conglomerate backing. He produces a small number of watches each year, all of them built entirely within the same building. Movements and cases and dials completed under one roof without the outsourcing that most Swiss production depends upon. The figure is modest by any industrial standard, and deliberately so. Journe has said in various interviews that he isn't interested in scale. What interests him is what a movement can do when it's built without compromise to cost or volume. The watches reflect that interest with a directness that's either austere or precise, depending on what you bring to the experience of wearing something made this way. The chronometer. Bleu is the piece most closely associated with his name among serious collectors. The dial is a deep, slightly shifting blue produced from a tantalum and niobium alloy. The movement sits in rose gold. This material combination isn't primarily an aesthetic decision. It's a function of how these particular metals behave over time and in close proximity to each other. The dial color doesn't read identically twice in the same light, which is either a technical consequence of the alloy or, if you have patience for that kind of observation, something else. There are people who have spent years on the waiting list for one of these watches. There are others who've come across a Journe in an estate or a collection and had no idea what they were looking at. That's not a failure of knowledge on their part. It's a reflection of how deliberately the manufacturer has positioned itself outside the channels where that kind of recognition normally travels. The distance between those two positions, between knowing immediately and never knowing at all, is the distance old money has always preferred to maintain. The Rolex hasn't declined. The Submariner remains the watch it's always been, and the manufacturer in Geneva continues to produce it to a standard the industry doesn't dispute. What the watch no longer does is function as an unambiguous signal of the kind it once provided, because it now functions as a different kind of signal entirely. The person wearing it has reached a particular level of success, or wishes to appear to have done so, and has chosen the most widely recognized evidence of that arrival. There's nothing dishonest about that choice. It simply communicates clearly, and in certain rooms, that clarity is its own message. The watches above have, for different reasons across different timescales, remained outside that legibility. Some because of their history, some because of the narrowness of the circle that recognizes them. The Journe sits at one extreme of that narrowing, and the Tank sits considerably further from it. Between them is a range of choices made over decades by people whose relationship with display was complicated enough that they needed a way to be seen only by the people already looking. That's what haute horlogerie has always offered its quietest customers. Not a watch that announces itself, but one that only answers when questioned by someone who already knows what to ask. Ferdinand Adolf Lange was born in Dresden in 1815. His great-grandson relaunched the manufacture in 1994, 49 years after it was dismantled. The 1815 model, named for the year the founder came into the world, is still the watch the house considers the clearest expression of what it has spent 180 years trying to build.